Hey there. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Welcome back. It's another Red Pill Religion podcast. Red Pill Religion, where amongst the things we say are that men going their own way makes sense. Till we give men reason to trust women, there's no reason for men to get married. Men's rights are also human rights, which shouldn't be a radical proposition, but seems to be. Please support our work on redpillreligion.com if you like the kind of work we do. Redpillreligion.com every day, where we have new videos, new essays by us and by others talking about various culture issues. We do talk about religion, but we are critics of secular social justice. We're critics of militant atheism. We have atheist friends. We aren't crazy. We have lots of atheist friends, actually. We go after the militants. We talk about the intersection of culture, politics, and religion. And we're mostly catered to young men. Everybody should remember that. Women are welcome to come on in, but we're rough and tumble boys, and we don't pull punches, and we don't care for damseling. And we're very MGTOW friendly, so even though we're not all MGTOW. So please come on by. In these days of social media censorship, also remember you will always find us on redpillreligion.com. We've had multiple censorship attacks, multiple times, multiple channel suspensions on multiple channels. This is actually our third channel. We're hoping to make it grow. Help us get it. So give us on this YouTube channel, give us a like, give us a subscribe, and tell your friends or enemies. Hit that bell, see if it works. It doesn't on the other channels. We could use your financial support. We're still waiting for Subscribestar to get somewhere. Maker support didn't work out, but we're still, for now, clinging desperately on Patreon. We do especially appreciate your PayPal and your Bitcoin donations if you like to see the kind of work we're doing. Please check us out on gab.com. at Red Pill Religion. Check us on Minds at Red Pill Religion. Check us on Facebook at Red Pill Religion. And we're probably going to be on MeWe soon. So tonight we have a special guest that I'm actually really pretty excited to have on, because I've been a fan of his work for a while. He has really impressed me. Please say hi, DDJ of Misandry Today.
Hey guys, what's going on?
I have been watching Misandry Today on and off for a while. I'm very both impressed and jealous of the production values, and I'm impressed with the depth and scope of the research. I have been a supporter of MGTOW for quite a few years, even though I've butted heads with and had stupid fights with some MGTOW that never made any sense. But that's because some MGTOW are in fact crazy. And maybe sometimes I'm clumsy. On the other hand, the vast majority of my encounters with MGTOW have been positive, and I just wanted to put that on record. MGTOW guys, I really do sympathize where you are. I'm probably best known under the legal name Dean Esme, which I tried to hide when I started Red Pill Religion, but you know, opponents doxed me, so screw it. I still do prefer to go by Max Online. But people should know that I was in Cassie J's movie, The Red Pill, which is a good movie, even though I've had very public war of words with some of the people in it. It's still a great, great film. And well, I would just start out by right off the bat, DDJ, is that as somebody who's done men's activism work and father's rights work and male domestic and sexual abuse survivor work for a really long time, it's been a long time since I've seen a channel I appreciate it as much as yours, especially coming out of the non-activist sector, because most MGTOW don't consider themselves activists. So what got you to decide to start doing the channel in the first place? What's your goal? What's your mission?
Well, you know, it's interesting. I actually came from the MRA stratosphere, so to speak. You know, I was an activist in Washington State for a long time. We helped get some laws passed to make things a little bit easier for fathers. But one of the things that I found is that every time a fathers' rights group decided that they were going to do something with fathers' rights and actually start moving forward, they would be the victims of entryism, and they would end up basically getting destroyed as far as like the group is concerned. You know, it's funny.
It's so funny you should say that. But go ahead.
You know, I say that because I figured you might be able to appreciate that. Yeah. So the reason I also bring it up is because The current governor of Washington State actually started out with an organization called POPS, which was Parents Opposing Punitive Support. It was an anti-child support organization. And now the guy is a hardcore SJW and feminist. And I think he wants to turn Washington State into a sanctuary state. So just to give you an idea of how insidious entryism can be, I've actually seen men's rights activists go full feminist. So I started, as an MRA, as a family law professional, and eventually found my way to MGTOW. I discovered, a lot of red pill stuff online, probably 2011, 2012. And then I basically decided, you know what? I could probably tell my story to people and help some people online. So last February, was it February? God, it seems like a long time. It's been about a year and a half, maybe a little bit longer. I guess it was February of 2017 now. Or I'm sorry, no, April of 2017. Sorry, I'm having a boomer moment. I got on TFM's show and I told my story. And he split it into 5 parts and called it DDJs Inferno. And then eventually he's like, hey, you've got legal knowledge. Would you help out? So I said, sure. So I started helping with the TFM show a little bit there and eventually grew into being a co-host, and then worked with him on the 420 show. And then I realized that he was so busy that there were things I wanted to talk about he just didn't have time for. And he made as much time for me as he could. But that's really how my channel got started, was because he just got too busy. He already had his own trajectory he was headed. And a lot of people right in the beginning were saying, DDJ, make your own channel. And I resisted for a long time. My channel's only been up for just over a year. And it's really interesting because when it came to the content that I started making, I mean, people started really appreciating it. And, of course, I still worked with the TFM show, and I released my book. I'm working on a second book now. And I just really wanted to provide information to kind of help men out. And I'm not even just talking about MGTOW men, but just men in general, because I think that the biggest challenge that a lot of people have in the MGTOW community is red pilling non-MGTOW men. And for a long time, there's been a lot of misconceptions about MGTOW from non-MGTOW, both men and women. And I think that when it comes to those things, there's a lot I can offer. So that's kind of how the channel got started, and that's kind of the direction I've been taking it in.
I would actually say that, my heart is just singing hearing all of these words. I really, when I was doing my men's rights work during the filming of Red Pill movie in the years before, I pretty much destroyed what was left of my health, and just went through some brutal experiences. And that's happened to a number of people, not just me, over the decades of trying to fight for these issues. And I have to say that one of the issues is absolutely entryists. Sometimes it's feminist entryists, but there's another spur of them who are basically neo-Marxists who are anti-feminists, but they are still neo-Marxists, hardcore. And they'll often spout that they're libertarians on economics, but they're not. I mean, I know I've encountered them, and I'm not the only one who has. So they'll be anti-feminists, but they'll be using people to otherwise forward cockamamie stuff. In fact, a secret I can tell you is that the whole term gynocentrism, while it may be useful, has a whole neo-Marxist philosophy underlying it that certain so-called men's rights activists are trying to peddle. And so it becomes this another topsy-turvy postmodern theory that women have been doing the oppressing of the men, and all because of the dark forces of religion and irrationality, brainwashing men into being subservient to women's interests. It's this whole postmodern, materialist dialectic thing that's garbage, but. And you'll get that kind of entryist too. I won't name names, but although there's at least 2 I'd like to. The point is, this is why men's rights fails.
And I will say this. Yeah, and I will say this. Since communists made entryism popular, it's the game every group plays now. You see this, I've seen this with white nationalists. I've seen this with socialists. I've seen it with communists. I've seen it with feminists. You know, I've even seen it in the PUA community trying to infiltrate MGTOW. So you see this all the time. And like every group now is trying to use entryistic type tactics to get into every other group that they see that's kind of on the rise.
No, it's true, and and maybe it's a good thing because uh, it used to be possible, and they still do this. Entryists, especially the professional paid ones, and by the way, professional paid entryists are very much a thing. And you will also find other entryists will be children of the wealthy, who will often like to disguise the fact that they are children of the wealthy, right? They may be in their 30s, 40s, 50s even, never had a job because they're still living on daddy's trust fund money. And they seem to have a lot of time on their hands, and they seem to be really nice. And yeah, it's not paranoid to think you've got an entryist. In fact, since we're here, it's a little ADHD, but I will actually recommend a book. Now I have significant hang on a second. When I'll go ahead and find this, I have significant political and philosophical and even scientific differences with this guy. But I admire his mind, and his analysis skills are often sharp. If you read a book called SJW is Always Double Down, Anticipating the Thought Police, it's a very good look at how social justice entryists work in this day and age. Although again, and it's really updated Alinsky tactics that he's describing here. Most of it is variants or more sophisticated update versions of what you'll find in Rules for Radical. Reading this book would help anybody just recognize that it's going on. One of the issues I would take with Vox Day here is exactly what you just said there, DDJ. While he describes what the Marxist, neo-Marxist, social justice, whatever, feminist, whatever you want to call it, entryist looks like, frequently atheists too, by the way, ideological ones, not just everyday normal ones, they'll be entryists. And Vox puts it all on the leftists, when in fact it's exactly as you just stated, DDJ. There are other groups doing it now, on the left, on the right, and sometimes you'll have competing leftist groups trying to be the entryists who win, or competing other radical groups. Entryism is the game. You gain entrance and you become a trusted follower, and then you try to manipulate from within.
Well, and I think that when it comes to the left, I mean, everybody knows that social justice and feminism is not about equality. It's not about gender rights. It's not about any of the things that they really talk about. It's just about power. And so the difference with entryistic groups is that, you know, different flavors of socialism, different flavors of communism, different flavors of feminism, they're all vying for power in the oppression Olympics. And, you know, the one that gets the most power is the winner. And that's really what you see a lot with a lot of these different entryists. That's why you see the infighting that constantly happens. That's why you see like the Women's March right now is having all kinds of problems, because you have different factions of feminism that are fighting one another. And again, when they run out of enemies to fight, this is what they do.
I will point out to you though, and this is probably the one that made me, you know, have a man crush on you best. You recently did this video, Dr. Jordan B. Peterson, This is Why Smart Men Are Avoiding Relationships. One of the things that has consistently frustrated me for many years, and one of the things I wanted to work on when I was at places like AVFM or helping create things like the Honey Badgers, or just being in that movie and all that went into helping make that movie happen. I, as a fairly conservative, I would not consider myself that conservative, but apparently in this day and age, I'm a radical right-winger. I was always kind of a moderate conservative with some socially liberal views. Didn't like libertarianism, but pretty middle of the road. But I had always wanted to, as a religious man and as a at least moderately conservative man, take the men's movement to engage conservatives and religious people on these issues. Just for the audience's sake, it's in the low bar, and it'll be on the blog tomorrow, and it'll be on Minds and all that. One of the biggest problems we have had for decades, and it's still there, is clueless conservatives and yes, clueless Christians who are completely tone deaf as to what's going on. And getting through to them is hard, yet I find that it's very possible. Because this video that you did here, you rightly called it out. The correct response to MGTOW and to men's rights and fathers' rights activists and to some of these other, what we can broadly call men's issues, would be to take them seriously. And they consistently refuse to do so. Although I've seen some movement in the right direction from people on the right, it's still nowhere near enough.
Well, do you know why that's happening though?
Well,
there's an actual reason that this is happening.
I have two or three, which may even get us into theological territory. So watch out, because we didn't necessarily come here for that. But go ahead, tell me.
One of the people who is religious that I follow is a blogger named Dalrock, Dalrock.
Yeah.
And Dalrock is probably, in my opinion, he's probably one of the better modern red pill married theologians out there. Very red pill, very patriarchal, very religious, but very common sense. And, you know, he talks about how he basically does what he can to incorporate red pill wisdom into religion, and he kind of crosses them back and forth, very similar to the way that Sunrise Hoodie does it. But Sunrise Hoodie has a little bit of a different flavor. But the thing that's interesting about Dalrock, and he correctly calls us out, he's actually one of the few theological content creators that I am aware of that to call this out, is that there has been a huge push in Christianity across the Christian sphere to feminize Christian religions. And the term that they use to do it, the way they feminize it, is a term called complementarianism. Dalrock speaks out against this all the time.
Yeah.
Now, it's so bad that a couple of feminists recently rewrote a feminist version of the Bible. And there is a huge push. Well, the problem that you have is that these complementarians, they have taken over large Christian organizations, and then they've started witch hunting the patriarchs that are there. So you have people that have worked all their life to be outspoken Christian patriarchs teaching their flocks for whatever reason. And what ends up happening is that these people get witch hunted out. They get Me Too'd out. And that's what feminists do. And what's interesting is that this is how a lot of feminists took control of a lot of these companies. They would go in as stockholders. They would get some cuck to finance them to be stockholders. And then they would file stockholder lawsuits and say, look, we don't have enough women on the board. We don't have enough women here. We don't have enough women there. So what happens? They start creating gender equality officers. They start hiring gender studies majors in the HR department. They start putting, gender equality people on the board. And then all of a sudden it's that get woke, go broke, or they end up getting completely screwed. And you see this all the time. It's not just in, religion. It's not just in big corporate culture. It's everywhere. But the thing about the religious piece of it is that these entryists have taken over Christianity for the most part. I mean, look at the Pope. Look at the Catholic Pope. He's completely cucked to social justice. He's actually advocating right now. You have Italy, you have France, you have Greece, who have blocked these NGO ships that are illegally trafficking illegal immigrants into Europe. And you have the Pope saying, open up your borders and let these people take over your country. I mean, this is the type of things that religious leaders are saying, and they know that it's cancer. I mean, Germany's trying to bribe migrants right now to leave their country. It's so bad.
Yeah, and now you just said a lot of things there I want to address. Let me pull up another video here. I'm gonna have to add these to the low bar. I want to hear that, because as a Catholic myself, I have a lot to say about what you just said. Pope Francis, there's a good, for anybody who's convinced that Catholics are the enemy here, because it certainly looks like in a lot of people's eyes, like Francis is the enemy to men and is totally cucked to social justice. I want everybody out there to be aware that Catholics are aware of the problem.
Oh, there's a huge civil war in the Catholic religion right now.
Yes, there is. And so a good one to look at about some of what's going on is this one right here, Red Pilled on Pope Francis, with Patrick Coffin, Dr. Taylor Marshall, Timothy Gordon. I can tell you
that looks like three gay guys.
Well, I'm sorry, none of them are gay.
Don't apologize to me. I'm okay with that.
In fact, no. In fact, part of this is they're talking about the problem of gay priests, because when you get into all the sex scandal stuff, what the mainstream media does not want to report, but because there is a strong hatred of Catholics, especially a big American tradition of that it is, don't report it right. More than 80% of the sex abuse victims that we're talking about, and this isn't about that, but more than 80 is like 82%, 83, something like that, over the whole history of this problem has been teenaged boys. Right. They make it out like it's girls and like it's little bitty children, and there's been some of that, but it is overwhelmingly teenage boys. It is actually mostly predatory gays. I'm sorry, predatory homosexual males, which is not to say that all gays are predators. They are. They go after boys. And guess what? We know from various sources like Bella Dodd, who gave testimony before Congress, Malachi Martin, and a lot of other sources, this was part of a social justice Entryists program, or a cultural Marxist Entryists program that started in the 1960s. Actually, it had its roots all the way back to the 30s. But the Catholic Church was intentionally targeted for this. And the goal was to bring in homosexuality. I'm sorry for my gay friends, I'm not picking on you, but this was their goal. I'm not saying it was the goal, to bring in homosexuality and feminism, and that they would subvert the whole church with that. You can research this, you can look at it, and we're aware that this is going on. One thing I would tell you as a Catholic, just to know too, is that not only are a growing number of prominent Catholics quite aware of what's going on and speaking about it, because we're not going to stop being Catholic. That won't happen, just so most of you know. Most of us are not going to do that. There's a kind of a ceiling on people leaving. Those of us who stay are going to be staying for the fight. The bottom line is it's there. And even when you talk about Pope Francis, I will semi-defend him. I used to defend him more than I did, because he gets accused of things that he's really not guilty of quite a bit by people who just don't understand what's going on. Like, he never tried to change the Our Father prayer. That's just garbage. That didn't happen. But, you know, whatever. There's been too much of it. And it is clear that he is chilling for global, what I would call globalist, corporatist, secular forces, the people bringing in the migrants and all that. The only thing I would point out in his defense, or Catholics' defense in general, is, again, we can criticize a pope. We don't have to obey everything he says. No sane Catholic thinks they have to obey everything a pope says, and this is a very controversial pope. I would also point out to anybody who's got a problem with their Catholic friends, remember this too, historically, we have seen popes blackmailed and extorted and forced under pain of things like, if you don't get on board with this, people are going to die kind of threats. I'm not saying that is happening, but it's foolish to assume the worst of Francis, and it's also foolish to assume Catholics are just so gullible that they go, oh, well, the Pope says this is what we do, so let's have more Muslim immigrants. Doesn't work that way. That's not how we work as a religion. Just so everybody.
Right. I think everybody's figured that piece of it out. I think we've
so much anti-Catholic shit. You cannot.
I know. I get it, but I think this particular audience this evening, I think you've kicked it to death. Let's move on.
All right, thank you. Sorry.
No, it's fine.
And the thing is with Dalrock comes from a very different Christian tradition than I do, but that's okay, because these are things that should come out. He's probably anti-Catholic. I can tell he's a sort of sola scriptura Protestant. I see this latest article he has is against chivalry, and me and my friend John Wright would both want to yell at him, because no, it's he who doesn't understand chivalry. Chivalry properly understood is not was not a female-centric thing and was not warped, but there were warped versions of chivalry. For example, and this is one of the weird things, it goes back to it, certain terminology, the left steals terminology. Like, for example, social justice used to be a very Christian concept. Social justice comes out of the Christian milieu. But Christian social justice is based on the idea that you are required to do charity, But that starts with, first you take care of yourself, then you take care of your immediate family members, then you take care of the people like in your parish or your local community. Then maybe you go to the government at the local level, and it's topsy-turvy. And what leftists did was they stole that terminology of social justice, and made it a top-down, we're going to have communism in the name of social justice. And so it's inverted. Similarly, you just said complementarity there. For many decades, many Christians worked on the model of something called the principle of complementarity. And it's a very, very reasonable thing, because the principle of complementarity is simply that in these Christian theological terms, originally was that men and women are different and they complement each other. And so women will naturally have certain skills and roles, and men will naturally have certain skills and roles. And it doesn't have to be set in stone, and every individual will be different, and God will have a different calling for any of them. But then you will have people say, I like that word complementarity. Now let me see if I can turn it into a warped social justice idea of it.
Well, yeah, and the complementarity that you talk about is different than complementarianism.
Yeah,
So,
and I believe it. And what are they basically all about with this complementarianism?
oh, it's just about, basically it's about equality, it's about feminism, and it's basically down with the Christian patriarchy.
One of the ways, although again, other groups are getting on this too, the Alinsky people, is they steal words. They control the words. That's how the whole cultural Marxism.
Oh yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, look, the first way that you take over a culture is you control the language. Once you're able to censor the language and you're able to censor what's said, then you can control the thoughts. I mean, that's a common sense communist sort of thing. So, but yeah, when it came to my video about Jordan B. Peterson and some of the stuff that's been going on, I mean, originally when he spoke out against MGTOW and he apologized, the apology was for saying the things he said. He never apologized or admitted that he was wrong.
Yeah.
And that's the thing that a lot of people miss. And so I respect a lot of what Dr. Peterson says, and he has a lot of, really good wisdom to share with the younger generations of men. But I think that the challenge, though, is that this idea of traditional marriage right now, it's a bad deal for men. And the problem that you see, is that the civil protection order in the United States and in most of the Western world, it criminalizes hurting a woman's feelings. You see, what a lot of people don't understand is, and this is something I've covered in other videos, is that if a woman feels threatened or she feels upset, she can get a civil domestic violence restraining order against a man. And that's the piece that really messes everybody up. And so then they don't want to look at this. They're like, well, that doesn't happen that often. And we're seeing, sometimes 600,000 to 1 million restraining orders every year. So that's 1 million men, 600,000 to 1 million men every year getting targeted for a civil domestic violence restraining order for being accused of a crime and having no civil due process rights to defend themselves. If you get accused of a crime, there should be law enforcement involved. There should be a police investigation. There should be a criminal prosecution. If somebody is truly victimizing somebody else, get them off the street. It's pretty simple. So I think the big frustration for a lot of people is that they don't understand that. And a lot of these people are so young that they don't appreciate what the laws actually say. And we don't even teach civics anymore in our schools. So a lot of people don't even know what their rights are.
And they don't, and sometimes they get bad advice. And that's something that really, why I really appreciate the stuff you do, is that you do make sure you know the law. Are you a lawyer, by the way? If I may
I'm not. I'm not.
You've done. That's okay. You don't have to be. In fact,
I was a litigation paralegal in family law for 10 years.
There you go. You've seen everything. You know all the dirty secrets too, because family law is an evil place.
It is
truly evil. Family courts and most of the lawyers are such scum. you hit on another one that means I really liked your video on Duluth feminist brainwashing and the ideological subversion of society, simply because everything in it is correct, and I very much suggest everybody see this. In fact, the feminist empire and the project to demolish husbands starts with domestic violence. I will go ahead and also give a shout out to my old friend Erin Pitsey. A book that's worth reading of hers is called This Way to the Revolution. It really is worth a read. I did a show with her for years and talked to all kinds of domestic violence people. She'll tell you she mentions this all the time. She started the world's first women's domestic violence shelter, and had been a feminist for about 5 minutes with it, but she got the bottom line is she became an unperson when she became public with the fact that the majority of the women who showed up at her world's first domestic violence shelter for battered women, the majority of those women had a serious violence problem, including violence especially towards their children that they had brought with them. So it was very obvious that they were abusive mothers, and that they had, and many of them had a problem with, and then tons of men were coming in trying to escape their abusive wives or get help for their children and couldn't get any. And that's when the feminists undid her, because they made a cause out of domestic violence, but they distorted the research. They completely distorted the research. And
that's what they did. That's what they did with the Duluth model as well.
Yes,
is they completely distorted. And the thing about Erin, the thing about Erin Pitsey that makes her such an icon, and the reason people should read her book, is because when she started telling feminists what was going on, she started receiving death threats. She ended up having to leave England because they were going to try to kill her. There were bomb threats. I think they killed her dog. I mean, the whole story about her is completely, this is what feminists do. When you disagree with them, they go scorched earth and they destroy your life.
Yes, they destroy your reputation. They pull your books off of shelves. Erin documents all this in her book, and of course, knew her for years. I still pray for her. Yes, and the thing is that the Duluth model, Erin herself and other professionals I've talked to who are red-pilled and know the real truth that women are about as equally violent as men, especially in the family, the researchers who know the truth always get pilloried and censored. But what they'll tell you is that what's so sick about the Duluth model is the Duluth model would actually work, or would actually be a somewhat effective way of looking at it. You would just have to take out all the misandrist stuff and assume that this describes what the cycle of violence is for both sexes. And then all of a sudden, the Duluth model is actually no longer that sinister, because a lot of what's in there is true. But it's just like with the wage gap and every other feminist statistic, they take the truth, they chop out half and make a freakish monster out of it. Because Duluth isn't, at least the core idea of Duluth isn't wrong, except the assumption that it's toxic masculinity and the assumption that it's a male perpetrated problem completely destroys its usefulness. Because otherwise, within Duluth, what you have is a model that says children learn violence from their parents and their environment and are more likely to be violent when they grow up. That's all true, son. But they messed it up. You see what I mean? It's just like the wage gap. They're lying while telling the truth. It's sick. Is that too much ranting?
Not at all. And when you're talking about that, you're talking about half truths. Like Lord Byron said, he said the worst kind of dishonesty is a half truth. So I totally get that.
Yeah, because it is true. As a guy who did work on this, it is true. For example, really, men who grow up to be violent and hit their women were usually in an abusive environment growing up, and feminist domestic violence experts are correct to identify that as a truth. What they don't want to hear is that they were usually beat by their mothers.
Right.
and it's and that's the part of the dynamic they don't want to hear. And
Well, that's why they don't ever want to talk about the CDC numbers when it comes to child abuse.
right, because single mothers are by a long shot the number one perpetrators. Stepmothers and stepfathers are kind of neck and neck, and biological fathers the least
Yeah,
from
of the
the
groups that are there. Yeah.
trial.
Yeah.
The
So
least. It's when the child gets older, like above 7, 8, 9, especially into the teen years, that you're more likely to see father on son or son on father violence. But even then, that's usually a family that has issues
right.
in the first place, and it's usually not just the men who have the issue. And this is the thing that also gets to me. Not to interrupt you, but I within the MGTOW sphere, we're both older guys. We're still Generation X, by the way. Have you noticed? Nobody ever talks about Generation X. We're both Generation X. But the millennials, half of them have grown up. The millennial MGTOW, for example, that I encounter, most of them have grown up without dads.
Oh yeah, yeah. I talk about this a lot. I talk about the multi-generational mentorship that doesn't exist anymore, which is
Yes.
part of the reason that I created my channel. It's part of the reason why I joined TFM in talking with a lot of the younger guys, is because, I mean, I just read a study the other day that said that 37% of all kids who were turning 21 years old in 2018 were born to moms out of wedlock. And the other half of what was left were born to divorced families. So you're talking 2/3 of children turning 21 in 2008 were either born or raised in broken homes.
Yes. And those so that is just going to be the average young man at this point in large
Right.
swaths of the country. And I can tell you that's incredibly painful, because if you discover what they don't want to put it in the current DSM-5, right? But it used to be well understood by psychologists, something called father issues.
Yep.
And young men with father issues. And by the way, I am not mocking anybody. I grew up I grew up from a really badly broken home. Okay, I have father issues. Okay, I'm not judging anybody. It's just that I'm older now and I've worked through a lot of it, and I can recognize stuff. And father issues are going to be typified by massive insecurities with women, with other men, a tendency to be not necessarily malevolently so, but kind of narcissistic, always concerned about what people think of you, always have to be right, touchy, or tend to turn very passive and soy boy type. And you got to be aware of it, because that's even something other young men should know. Because I basically, what I'm saying is that MGTOW is probably going to be even more overrepresented by that. Because statistically, we would know that young men who are coming out of intact families still, and they do still exist, I doubt are going to be as moved by MGTOW, because they haven't seen the destruction except in other men, I guess.
Well, I don't necessarily agree with that, because there's a lot of men that I talk to of the younger generations, especially the millennials and some of the Gen Zs. One of the things that's interesting about those groups is that those that are raised by single moms go, holy shit, I see these women like my single mom, or they've seen their single mom emotionally abuse the men in her life, or they've seen the single mom abuse the dad emotionally. They don't want a part of that. They don't want, it's like somebody very close to me once said, why would I want to date when basically all I would find is a younger version of my mom?
And a lot of them don't like talking about it publicly, but you get them in private. I've talked to so many these young men, yes, and they were abused by their moms or by their older sisters. I mean, like, they have the shit beat out of them, and stuff like that, which of course further deranges their idea of women. Which is, I'm not lecturing, I'm just saying the whole thing is, I mean, if you wanted to destroy a population group within 2 generations, you would do this to them.
Right.
And our biggest task is actually, as Generation X men, we're in our late 40s, 50s. We're in our 40s and 50s now. The generation, I mean, we're the ones who saw what the boomers did, and kind of went along with it because we didn't know what we were doing, because it seemed to make sense at the time, is how I put it.
Well, the Gen X was the transition generation, and I think that a lot of people don't really understand that because, you know, the boomers, especially the boomer feminists, I mean, they're the power people now.
Yep.
And you know, those are the people that have all the power. Those are the people, the second wave feminists are the ones that change society fundamentally. And the Gen X feminists and the Gen X social justice warriors, they're now the current college professors and the current teachers and the current leaders at the state and local levels. So what we're seeing is that we're seeing that next level of indoctrination. And I think that when it comes to a lot of people, I think the reason why Gen Z is such a positive force is because of children's natural tendency to rebel. So social justice is now the mainstream society social more. And so Gen Z gives it the middle finger out of rebellion and automatically becomes more conservative in the trade, which in amusingly enough is I mean, the irony is great. So, you know, I think that when it comes to these sorts of things, I think that we're going to see that this younger generation, I mean, there's a little bit of hope there. As long as they stay red pilled and they don't get cucked by, you know, gynocentric traditionalism, I think that they're going to be the generation that kind of pulls us out of this whole spiral.
I think Gen Z is too, and that gets to the issue, an issue that I have been trying unsuccessfully for years to get people to talk about this because it matters. I'm going to go ahead and mention a couple of things. It's going to touch on the religion issue again. People keep accusing me of being a fundamentalist trying to convert people. No, it's not what I'm interested in. It's a book that is absolutely worth reading. By a sociologist. He's a professor of sociology, very credible, has hundreds of publications, peer-reviewed and popular, called Triumph of Faith. Now you look at this book and you think, oh, this is all about Jesus or whatever. No, it's nothing about that. This is about what is happening globally everywhere you look, which is the growth of religion. Actually, religion has been on a growth trend in Europe, the United States, Canada, all of Asia, all of it. Including Japan, for quite some time now, because and one of the things that is happening, and it's a transition we're going to want to watch for because we're seeing the beginnings of it, is this. There's something called the secularization hypothesis that was forwarded by people like Steven Pinker and quite a few others, which said that religions, traditional and otherwise, would slowly be dying off. As children were educated and learned about science, supposedly, and all that. And this was actually a social justice narrative. It was prog narrative. It simply isn't true. In reality, and I have other research to back this up if anybody wants to see it. In reality, specifically atheism has been on a sharp nosedive for most of the last decade and is showing no signs of coming out. And that is actually the only world religion that's shrinking. All of the others are growing, and they're growing everywhere. They're growing in Western Europe. They're growing in the United Kingdom. They're growing in Japan. They're growing in India. They're growing in China. And when you look at it, what we're going to be seeing is a transition, because one of the things that turns out to be true is that non-religious people have fewer kids, and atheists, specific dogmatic atheists, have the least number of kids, and the devoutly religious have the largest number of kids by far. Basically, the non-religious are not breeding at replacement level, atheists especially the lowest, at all, and they are aging and graying fast. There's also an apostasy rate out of atheism that's stellar. Most people are spiritual. Because contrary to the secularization hypothesis, the children of the religious do not give up their religion. The vast majority of them stay religious or leave religion and then come back to it. And it's overwhelming. And religious populations, I think you need 2.1 children per woman just to maintain. The non-religious populations averaging around 1.8, the atheist population at like 1.1. And the religious are at like 2.33, and the devoutly religious are at like almost 4 children per woman. And they don't convert out, which means religion is here to stay in a really big way. And that's an important, it's funny because that is a red pill worth taking, because we are still subjected daily to the narrative that religion is dying. It's not. And so one of the things I think it's important for young men to hear is that regardless of what you think of religion, you should, if you want to develop friendships and career prospects in life, you should actually probably learn to make religious friends, because they're coming up, and Gen Z is coming up very religious. We are being treated as stories in the mass media that young people are fleeing the churches in droves, but it's mostly hot air. They're mostly fleeing institutional churches, although that's somewhat exaggerating. It's definitely happening in some, like the Catholics are going through that right now. But what they're doing is they're winding up in more informal, unchurched religions. They're turning pagan, or they're turning into evangelical Christians.
Well, let me kind of talk to you a little bit about that a little bit. So
Sure.
I think that's great, and I think that, you know, any kind of education is good education. So it sounds like this book has got decent reviews, and that's great. One of the things that when I was young and when we started talking about, like, you know, how do you improve your life? How do you get better? You know, and I say young, I was, you know, 18, 16, you know, probably between, I'd say 15 and probably 25. We talked about, I mean, a lot of the education that they gave young men back then was, you know, how do you improve your life? And how do you live a healthy life? And I think that one of the pieces that we talked about is that life was kind of in 4 quadrants for us. So you'd have one quadrant that would be your financial life. So in other words, your financial success, you know, what kind of job you had, your professional success, that kind of thing. Then you had another quadrant that was your social life. In other words, your social connections, those people around you that kind of kept you sane, because humans are social animals. The third quadrant in your life that you had was physical fitness, your health. So in other words, you ate and drank in moderation, you took care of your health, you exercised, those types of things. It was more of like a holistic thing. But the fourth quadrant was interesting, and that was religion and spirituality. And the reason that is because as humans, we have to have something greater than ourselves to believe in. And what's interesting is that when you have something greater than yourself to believe in, or you believe in it in a way that is a spiritual way, that's when you start going to that next level. And for a healthy man specifically, you had to have all 4 quadrants. You had to have a balance between your financial and your social. You had to have a balance between your fitness and your social, or your fitness and your financial, and your religious and your financial. That balance had to be achieved. And when those people who achieve that balance, they basically led happier lives. And so
Yes.
I don't necessarily, and I see somebody in the comments says this guy acts like religion fixes the problems. I don't think it does.
No.
And I don't think that necessarily that men who are religious should either breed or should marry or anything else, especially not with the laws the way they are. But I also believe that, you know, whatever your spirituality is, whether you're a Buddhist Zen meditator, whether, like you said, whether you're pagan, whether you have some kind of spirituality in your life that allows you to get that spiritual centering, that I think is the most important thing. And what's interesting that when you bring up this idea of religion, a lot of studies have shown that Judeo-Christian families that are intact with biological mother and biological father in the home raising the children, they do better.
Yeah.
They do better than families that do not have those Western values. So
let me just say, for any of your audience that are coming in or saying, what am I saying? Come check us out come join our chat room or check out what we're doing. We have people hanging out with us and volunteers for us who are actually atheists or agnostics or Hindu or Buddhist. We actually embrace exactly what DDJ is saying here. We embrace that. We believe that young men need to explore the spiritual, because, as we like to say, belief in the supernatural and transcendent is normal, healthy, rational, and evidence-based. I'll give you a little rant here, a book you can look at by a research psychologist, again, with plenty of peer-reviewed research on his table, on his resume, did research showing that it is normal for children, men and women alike, male and female alike, to develop what we would call a religious sense between the ages of 2 and 4. Around the same time they're developing language development. And it's the idea that something bigger than us, something beyond us is running things, and that there may be invisible spiritual forces. By the way, there's no evidence that that's a delusion. Children just normally develop this sense. And then from there, it goes to what they learn from their parents, what they learn from their culture, but they are always seeking this spiritual stuff. So whether they wind up, they go into Hinduism or Buddhism or yoga or whatever it is, it's actually completely normal behavior in humans. And there is no scientific evidence at all that it's insane or delusional. And we've got to stop telling young men that it's insane or delusional or dangerous to think about scary ideas. Religion isn't something to fear. You want to find the people who are sane, who are practicing some sort of sane religion or spirituality. Or, like I would say, at bare minimum, as a young man, you should learn to have religious friends and not be afraid of religious people, because there's a lot of them and they're not going away. And so this
well, I think that what I would rather say is this. Okay. Make your friends where you're going to make your friends, and don't shy away from someone just because they're religious.
Yes. Well, really,
because the reality is that the religious people are going to be where they're going to be anyway.
Eventually, yeah. If they're, well, a lot of religious people, especially on college campuses and that, are in hiding, or they're at a job where they can't talk about their religiosity. But so I am making that point. And I've encountered, and a number of my religious friends have encountered, a lot of anti-religious hostility coming out of millennials. They think that mocking religious people is funny, and they think that even mistreating religious people is funny. I've encountered it, and a lot of my religious friends have. And so this is why I'm mentioning it. No, learn how to make a religious friend, because we outnumber you in the long run. And a lot of us are pretty cool people.
Well, yeah, I know. The communists always brought up that outnumbering argument too, and I always say that's what 50-round magazines are for. But I take your point.
It's just demographic reality. You're going to be surrounded by religious people wherever you go, unless you go into some ideological bubble place.
Like I said, 50-round magazines are a thing. But no, I'm just saying that, like, I get what you're saying. And all I'm saying is this: if you're socializing with people and some of those people are religious, just, let them do their thing and do your thing. I mean, one of the things about being MGTOW is that you don't really shame men for doing things that are positive in their life unless they're being a cuck. And then, of course, the shaming is to educate. It's not necessarily to just ridicule just to be ridiculing, unless, of course, they're a male feminist, and then they deserve whatever they get. But beyond those things, I think that when we talk about these things, and I think that it's important for people to understand that there has to be just some kind of balance in your life. And the reality is that there are a lot of religious people out there that are good people, or at least decent people. My only concern with a lot of people that pontificate, though, is, again, the complementarianistic people who start pushing this female empowerment bullshit. So, there's a difference between finding a good religious friend and running across a religious trad cuck. So,
exactly. I agree.
So, I mean, that's the piece that's extremely important. That's one of the reasons that I like Sunrise Hoodie so much in his content, is because he takes it from a religious perspective, but it's definitely red pilled. And that's the piece that a lot of people miss when they talk about, religious teachings, when they talk about the different aspects of the Bible and such. So that's kind of the piece there. Now, you said you had another video that I did that you wanted to talk about.
Okay. Yes. Open letter to Tradcons and feminists. Because I think on this one you definitely hit on, again, the same theme, which is that there are conservatives, religious and non, who are just being ridiculously stupid, and they think telling men to man up is enough. I mean, guys do need to hear a little of that, right? There's nothing wrong with, put your shoulders back, clean up your room, but
the problem that I see, and this is one of the things that I brought up in this letter. Well, and I say I brought it up, I kind of made more of an allusion to it as opposed to actually forthrightly discussing it, is that a lot of the people who are in the Tradcon community, a lot of the older, the leader types in the Tradcon community, they were raised in a different world.
Yep.
They don't exist in the world that most people exist in today. And what I mean by that is that, many of them are in the twilight of their careers. Many of them are on the downhill slide to retirement. They've lived a different lifestyle. They've lived a different community. They've been insulated. Even those that have lived in like larger cities and larger communities, they've been very much insulated from a lot of the social justice stuff that's out there. And because it doesn't affect their daily life, they go to church every Sunday. They do their Tradcon things, they coach, they do whatever, they make whatever sacrifices that are needed to make for their for their husbands or their wives or whatever. If they're going to be unfaithful, they become unfaithful and they stay married. That's kind of their thing. So when it comes to a lot of the problems they had, is that when feminists first started pushing this idea that you have to protect women, the Tradcon men were like, yeah, we do. We do. They are the weaker sex. There are these differences.
Yeah, they fell right for that. They fell right for that.
They did. They absolutely did. And they were lied to the entire time. And they basically, I don't know. It's like the Margaret Sanger in the birth control movement. She showed up in the African American communities and then told all these women to kill their unborn kids. And basically what she did was she inspired African American women to commit genocide against their own race. She never told them that she hated them. She just said, this is what you have to do to be a stronger woman. And all these African American women bought into it. And in 1910, the African American community was 15% of the population of the United States. Today, it's less than 13%. It's a drop of like 20%. And the majority of that drop is as a direct result of abortion. So when you talk about these things here, a lot of these feminists never told these Tradcon men, we hate you. We hate you because you have a penis. We hate you because you are male. We hate you because you've earned things that we want that we don't want to work for. And so they were manipulated.
It was more than that, though, because they fell for a distorted version of chivalry. Real ancient chivalry, if you get into what it is, women have jobs too and expectations, and a man's not expected to be nice to a slattern, a whore, or a liar, amongst other things. But that's another conversation. Conservatives bought it. They heard fake statistics coming out of the Duluth model people of a rash of women being beaten, and they stepped up and said, well, we have to protect them. And that's where it starts. And in reality, a proper Christian understanding, and actually Jewish and other religions, is, I mean, I heard this great crack. It's like, I heard this old priest. He said, I hear that, when women do bad, it's because some horrible man oppressed her in some way. And all I can think is, have you ever known a woman? Have you ever met one? Have you ever heard one give confession? Well, you read your Bible, man. The Bible is full of lousy women and the horrible things women do. The examples of Jezebel and Delilah and others are very instructive. The Bible's not stupid on all the wicked ways of women and how they're not perfect at all. But conservatives bought it, and they need to hear it now, because seriously, these fake rape allegations, these fake rape statistics, the child abuse statistics that are all distorted, the domestic abuse violence, and I've even heard conservatives and so-called Christians telling men who got raped in financial court. Financially raped in divorce court and lost their children, to just, man up. And that it was their responsibility because they were not properly, they did not properly control their submissive wife. And that's obscene. And by the way, deeply unchristian.
Well, I
But
think that yeah, and I think that again, I totally understand that, and again, that's a level of ignorance. That's like a lot of the people who ignorantly think things about MGTOW that aren't true. And so again, it's a question of educating them. And honestly, I think the Kavanaugh hearings really educated a lot of Tradcons into how much cancer the current batch of feminists
I
really
am
bring to the table.
I am by no means a Trump rah rah MAGA hat wearing guy, but I dropped dead. I thought I would drop dead on the spot. I did hear the president of the United States openly say that it can be a frightening thing to be I forget his exact words. It can be a scary thing to be a young man in America today, and he
Oh
was
yeah.
talking about false allegations. I'm like, a president of the United States said that out loud in my
Did
lifetime?
you hear did you hear Tucker Carlson just a few days ago?
No, I did not.
Tucker Carlson said that a lot of basically said that women who out earn men are helping destroy society because they're destroying the birth rate and they're destroying the marriage rate and they're destroying the rate of families because women only want to marry up. I mean, it was a very red pill moment, and like feminists lost their shit over it and started calling for a second round of boycotts because of it. Because heaven forbid red pill wisdom hit the mainstream news. I mean, and this is the type of stuff that MGTOW have been talking about for 5 years online,
Yes,
and now it's
and
hitting the
MRAs and
mainstream.
MRAs.
Yeah, and now it's hitting the mainstream. And so I think that when it comes
Happening.
to these types of things, yeah, it's happening faster than we see, and honestly, at some level, it gives me hope. Because at the very least, there'll be a fighting chance when the Civil War happens.
I'll tell you another one too. Another good point you made in an open letter to Tradcons and anti-feminists is, and as an old MRA guy, I'm married, okay, but I'm in a place where that's in an age and in a place where it makes sense for me. I don't recommend it for young men and anti-feminist women. I submitted an article to something called Brass Pill that's run by John Hawkins of Right Wing News, and he's still kind of one of those blue pilled conservatives because I wrote an article saying, "Don't trust. Can you trust anti-feminist women? No." And he published it, but he's like, "I don't understand. Why would you not trust conservative women?" I'm like, "Oh, dude, because it is so easy for a deceitful Delilah, if I may say, or a deceitful thought, a deceitful slut, a deceitful hoe to say, yes, I'm an anti-feminist. So she seems attractive to you. And she could still just screw you over 15 ways from Sunday.
Yeah, I
And
mean,
there's some
yeah,
conservative Republican Christian men I've talked to who got raped by their conservative Republican Christian wives. So yeah, anyway, go ahead, Dee.
Yeah, I was gonna say. I mean, women are chameleons. That's the reality. I mean, my second wife was an officer in the young Republican Party when I met her. I mean, so for all these people that are like, conservative women this, conservative women that, hashtag not all, but I'll tell you what, a lot of them, they're no different than the feminist women. They just speak a different game. That's all. Their mating partner targets are just slightly different, but it's the same story. It's just a different day. Um, but again, when you talk about a lot of these things, I mean, I did a video about an anti-feminist woman recently who, she went after the MGTOW community, and she ran around and she's been telling everybody in her channel, she's got almost 100,000 subs. She's been telling everybody that she's an anti-feminist.
Yeah.
And then she comes out in this video and says, this is why we need feminism. And here's the thing, the stuff she talked about in her video, I agree with her. That element of the MGTOW community is trash, and they should die in a dumpster fire. But again, my view of the situation is a little bit different than most, because I mean, yeah, gynocentrism exists, yeah, female nature exists, yeah, hypergamy exists, but I don't think that women are the problem. I think that the feminist indoctrination is the problem. And so this is where I differ from a lot of people. It's kind of where I kind of take a different turn or a different fork in the road. And so I see this, and I see these people who, they don't quite get it, that women aren't necessarily the enemy. And then what ends up happening is that you have these women who, for all intents and purposes, are feminists, and they support the feminist agenda, but then they run around, they tell everybody that they're anti-feminist. And the reality is that they believe in what I refer to as true egalitarianism as opposed to legal egalitarianism. Now, when it comes to legal rights, I'm absolutely a legal egalitarian. But when it comes to actual egalitarianism outside of the court of law or outside of rights, legal rights, I should say, then I'm not. And I should also say this. When it comes to rights, rights should be earned. They should not be given. You don't earn the right, you don't get it. And that's just where it's at. But I think that, but you see these people all the time, and they run around, and it's like Lauren Southern is a perfect example. She's a conservative woman. She tells all these women, go get married young, go have kids, go have a family, go do this, go do that. And she doesn't do it herself. And you see, there's a lot of women that are promoting this, and they're not doing it themselves. It's like it's like they're the generation. TFM has this thing where he talks about the three types of feminists. There's the young feminist who's the complete idealist. There's the middle-aged feminist who is the professional feminist. She's basically there because it makes her money. And then you have the bitter old hags. And I think that when it comes to the conservative side, I think that you have kind of the same sort of thing. I think you've got, the young idealists, and then you have your professional anti-feminists, and then you have the feminists whose life, or the anti-feminists whose life was destroyed by feminists or by the feminist agenda, but they regret it because they're too old. Their lottery ticket is expired, to use the words of Human. And so they're trying to educate the younger generation to go, don't fuck up like I did. Because again, the thing about what people understand is, and what both men and women don't understand is that feminism and communism and this progressive agenda, they cause people, they entice them and manipulate them to thinking that all this bullshit is true. But they want them to make these types of decisions that there's no return from. It's like they're forever tainted, to use a religious term without diving into religion. But once that taint is there, it doesn't go away. It's like you can't unring the bell. When a woman cheats on the man who she realizes later absolutely loved her and would give his life for her, she regrets it. But she can't take that back. She can't go turn back the clock. You can't turn back time and go, I wish I didn't do that. And when you have these people out there, and you have these young progressives that are told that they can do whatever they want, and then they go do that, and then they realize that the price to pay, they go, I wish I didn't do that, and then they can't change it. It's like the STD epidemic, for example. We have incurable versions of formerly curable STDs now, and these people get these STDs, and it destroys their lives.
And we can't come back. We totally normalize casual sex that way, and rubbers aren't good enough, guys. And yeah, it's shocking.
Right. Well, I guess, and that's my point. But I'm just using that as kind of an example. And so, you have a lot of these young progressives, and you have a lot of these socialists / communists who are completely ignorant and misinformed. And they believe the bullshit they're spewing. And you see generations of women that they're 40 and they're 50 and they're 60 years old. And they say, gosh, when I was in my prime childbearing years, I was on top of the world. Everything was great. And now they can't get the attention of a man. They feel invisible. They can't have children. They just, all the things that they probably should have done, that they regretted that they couldn't do. Yes. They can't do now because the time is gone. And so when it comes to the situation today, you see this and you're like, look, educate these people. And I see that, like I said, with the one that I called out, she's a professional anti-feminist. And you can tell she's a professional anti-feminist because she's profiting off of this.
Yep, but female MRAs that are doing the same damn thing. It's disgusting.
Well, yeah, and you see it. I used to be on Facebook. I was in a bunch of MRA groups, even when I was MGTOW, before I created content. And you saw this all the time. Half the MRA groups on Facebook are led by women, and the women run everything, and they don't give men a voice. It's like if it doesn't passes their muster, then it doesn't get said. And it's like, wait, if you want to be a father's rights advocate, if you want to be a men's rights advocate, then you need to advocate for men. Now, I'm not saying that these women
all
can't.
kinds of men.
Yeah, and I'm not saying that these women can't do that. I'm saying that they're not.
They should be, to be blunt, they should be in a subordinate role, period.
I don't know. I don't know about that. I think here's the thing. I don't think that they should be. I think that men should lead men, and I don't necessarily think that the women should necessarily be in a subordinate role per se, as much as I think that men should be leaders as often or more often than women when it comes to men's rights. Because the problem that you have is that women and men communicate differently. So what is acceptable to a man is offensive to a woman when men communicate with one another. It's just that's our culture, that's our biology, that's our communication style. And so because we communicate differently, we're more likely to offend a woman when we don't mean to, because of just the nature of who we are. And so the problem that you have, though, is that because women have an in-group preference in general, what happens is when they take over these men's rights groups, they're more susceptible to feminist entryism, even if they are truly anti-feminist. I don't think that all women are
some kind of entryism. So I've seen it even in activist groups, some kind of social justice entryism or other entryism. They always try to come in, and they can't keep it together. And that's probably a permanent problem, you know, because people with money want to do this.
Well, exactly.
And so it happens. It's not even just skeevy individuals. Feminist groups and non-feminist groups do this all the time, including spending money just to hire people to go and do these sorts of things if it's important enough. And that's the skeevy way this stuff works. I want to go back to something earlier, DDJ, and then maybe we'll start wrapping this up. But you had mentioned earlier that you had seen that it used to be that they had research showing that of the quadrants of a balanced life, one of the quadrants was a spiritual. Have you done a video on that topic? Because no. I would like to see it, because I can tell you a few things about it, and I'll stop proselytizing. But these books I'm recommending.
Oh, come on now. We both know you're not going to stop proselytizing. It's fine.
I'm not really. This is a book that really messed me up when I read it, because I was an atheist for so long. This book, Face of the Fatherless, another one from a research psychologist with a lot of research data on it. This one actually shocked me as a men's rights guy, actually, and as a former atheist. I read it. We have studies now, since atheism has been popularized the last 10 plus years. Atheists are over 90% male. With a bullet, more than 90% consistently, and they are over 90% fatherless or with abusive fathers, over 90%, and they are also about 8 times higher than the general population to suicide. And so this is not to turn you Christian. It truly isn't. I mean, what you were just saying about yoga, what you were just saying about Hinduism, whatever you. The spiritual component actually matters, and I firmly believe we've been indoctrinated by basically cultural Marxists to completely dismiss this element, and that's ideological, because it's natural to be interested in these ideas.
And let me talk to you a little bit too about that. One of the reasons I haven't done a video about this is because this stuff comes from people like Zig Ziglar and Anthony Powers and Stephen Covey and a lot of people like that. I mean, this is like there used to be these self-help guides and self-help classes people would take. And this is the type of stuff that they would say about how to be successful and do those types of things. And these guys, I mean, their books are timeless wisdom. And, not just them, but others like them in that particular generation. So, we see this, now it's esoteric knowledge, but I mean, this used to be commonplace back when I was, 16 to 25.
It used to be like one of the things on a psychiatric or psychological evaluation to see if you were having serious depression or other issues, or you might be suicidal, is that you had recently stopped going to church or synagogue or whatever. That was just a life warning sign that you were in trouble.
Right. Well, if you're a neo-Nazi going to synagogues all the time, that might be a problem. But other than that.
Yeah. Well, exactly. But I mean. I really do think this component matters, and I'm absolutely not telling somebody even to become a Christian. I am telling them that really, if you look into it, the whole atheism thing and popularization of it was indoctrinated with the feminism and the secular social justice to make you believe in scientific naturalism and to make you think that the spiritual doesn't exist or is irrelevant. And the data is overwhelming that no, we need it for some kind of you got to make some kind of peace with the spiritual element in your life, whatever it is, however you do that. And it matters because it correlates with suicide, amongst other things. Humans appear to need something spiritual like this. It appears to be biological and innate, and I don't think guys should be afraid of it. They should only be afraid of joining a mind control cult. And believe me, all religions are not mind control cults. They really aren't. So that's all I would say there. And I think it really is worth addressing, especially because I know a lot of my religious friends feel a deep hostility coming out of MGTOW and other circles. It's not there because a lot of guys I know are real sympathetic with the MGTOW, but
so
they feel like
it sounds like your next video is going to be on this then.
Oh, it probably will be. It probably will be, because it's totally worth talking about, and we talk about it all the time. This is a good time to wrap up, though. I'm going to ask everybody to please be sure to subscribe to Misandry Today. DDJ is doing some of the best content I have seen on these issues, and a MGTOW who really knows what he's talking about. By the way, he's also a dad, and one of the few dads who was successful in keeping his children through divorce court. And so dude knows a lot. And the videos, I have yet to find one that I had a major issue with. And I've been looking at these issues for decades. So I really commend everybody to check that out. I also invite everybody, come check us out on redpillreligion.com. We have reopened our free Discord chat room to the public. We had closed it, but we've reopened it, so feel free to join if you want to. Tomorrow night we're doing a nerd stream talking about manga and video games and such. Tuesday, we're doing a response video to Godless Cranium. Wednesday, John C. Wright, the philosopher, will be here. So we're here every night. So everybody, if you would please give us a like, give us a subscribe, tell your friends or enemies, check us out on redpillreligion.com, and God bless.